Greetings, metalheads, and welcome to No Nonsense Metal Reviews. I'm George, and today I'm back with another album ranking. This time, I'm going to be ranking the full-length studio albums of Denmark's finest. We're talking Danish Heavy Metal absolute legends, one of my favourite bands, and a hugely important, hugely influential band, the mighty Mercyful Fate. The legends that are Mercyful Fate. Now, Mercyful Fate have been around since 1981. They've been around for quite a while. They have only released 7 full-length studio albums within that time, which obviously isn't a huge amount, considering that's, 43, 44 years? So not a huge amount of albums there, but all of those albums were actually released in a sort of 16-year period between 1983, in which we saw the debut album, and the last full-length album that they've released, which was actually in 1999. So between 1999 and I think it was 2019, there was actually pretty much a hiatus, or they'd split up. There was a massive period of inactivity. They have since reformed, a slightly different lineup, and they have been touring, doing the festivals, doing the circuit. I believe there is an intention to do another album, or at least some new material. But 7 albums between, as we say, 1983 and 1999, but they are all really good albums. And actually, I found this to be really quite difficult. I think in fairness, the top 2 albums for me were pretty much set in stone. It was all of the other albums that I really did struggle with, and all of them have been rotating and rotating. And I have listened to all of these albums so many times over the last few weeks, month or so, in preparation of doing this album ranking. And it's been thoroughly enjoyable because I've loved revisiting these albums. I absolutely worship this band. They are freaking brilliant. But trying to rank them is incredibly, incredibly difficult. So in the end, you just have to make up your mind and go with it and just go for it. So we're going to be ranking from least to most favourite. That said, I want to make it absolutely clear that these albums have been rotating a lot, as I say. And also, even if an album is slightly lower down my list, it's still an amazing album. There is not a bad Mercyful Fate album, only top quality, legendary heavy metal. So we are going to kick off, and I'm actually going to be taking the opportunity to show off my vinyl versions of these albums, as why not? Get to enjoy the great big album covers. I'm not going to be taking the vinyl out and showing off the posters and all that good stuff on this occasion. However, my intention is to, while Mercyful Fate is still very much in my mind and very prominent, fresh in my memory, I'm going to be doing a collection reflection at some point soon, in which I'm going to be going through all of the vinyl versions and all of the CD versions that I have of this mighty band. So, first of all, we're going to go with album number 7. This is the last full-length album from the band. This is 9, released in 1999. I love this album. This is a freaking brilliant album. It's also the heaviest, in my opinion. This is the most metallic. Now, I've talked about this album quite recently as being a underrated album, and with very good reason, because, in my opinion, this album is, yes, a bit of an unsung gem in this great, great discography. A truly fantastic discography. But I think, and it did surprise me, I will admit, because I kind of thought that the album that was going to be at number 7 for me, least favourite of all of these, I thought that was pretty clear. But actually, from revisiting the other albums, really did move up in my estimations. But I still think this is a stunning album. Kicks off with some great tracks. Last Rites is a really freaking heavy song. We've got Church of St. Anne, which is really, really memorable. Sold My Soul, which is a bit of a weird one. There's almost a bit of a simplicity to this album. It's really heavy, but some of it is just, it's quite stripped back heavy metal. I think Sold My Soul is a good example of that. Burn in Hell is brilliant, a little bit more of an old school Mercyful Fate kind of vibe there. The Grave, Kiss the Demon, which is creepy as hell. Got Buried Alive, and 9. Start to finish, a really good album. A pretty short and sweet album for Mercyful Fate. The whole band here sounds really good. The King still sounds brilliant. Still does to this day. Production is good. And the only reason that it's ranking at number 7 is because the other albums are also really freaking good. And I just am currently enjoying some other albums a little bit more. So number 9 from 1999 is my number 7. Moving rapidly on to number 6 then. This album surprised me that it managed to topple number 9 from its number 6 spot. Getting confused with all these numbers. But at number 6, I'm going with Dead Again. Now this album has massively grown on me with time. It's a great cover. Obviously, you know, it's based on the skull and the creature pointing through the fire from another certain notable, iconic Mercyful Fate album cover. More on that in a little while. But Dead Again was released in 88, I believe. 1998, I should say. This is actually, as far as I'm aware, the only double album. So it's actually on 2 vinyl, 4 sides of vinyl here. The first time, or the first few times that I listened to this album, I didn't quite get on with it. I'll admit. I found this one to be a little bit more kind of out there, a little bit strange. It's quite a progressive album, in fairness. There's little progressive flares here and there. It is a good album, and it has really grown on me with time. I think that the playing is brilliant here. The album length and the length of the songs is definitely longer. It's a much longer album. The lineup is good. They're all good musicians here. It's a little bit of a strange one. So we have had some lineup changes here. I believe it's the first album not to include Denner. But good musicians, tight lineup. The King sounds great. And what's really stuck with me is a couple of tracks in particular. When you really get into it, maybe not listening to it with the ears that are expecting to hear the Mercyful Fate, the sound and style of the earlier years, maybe that was where I was going wrong. So once you kind of accept that they're a little bit maybe more progressive, I'd say this is a really heavy album as well, just like 9. It's a really heavy album, but the opening track, Torture 1629, is an absolute beast. Great riffs there. The King sounds brilliant. Excellent stuff. Really good. The Night is another great track. Since Forever is a bit of a strange one. It's got that kind of like weird, unnerving, very much King Diamond style tracks. You know, just a little bit weird, a little bit strange and sinister. The Lady Who Cries is a great one, but Banshee is infectiously catchy. Great vocals from the King, obviously. Proper Banshee shrieks, awesome. We've got Mandrake, which is a great one as well. I think the issue that I have with this album is the title track, Dead Again, I think it's about 13 minutes long. It's a really long piece. And again, it's very strange. It is a good song. Can't fault that. It is a good song, but it's just a little bit weird. And I feel like it kind of breaks the momentum. That track might have been better as the closing track, maybe. You know, if you've kind of had your fill by that point, you can maybe lift the needle. But then we come back for Fear and Crossroads. So those are both good songs. They're both solid songs. As I say, the whole album is actually really heavy. Despite this kind of very strange, you know, the orchestra, and that's a theme that keeps coming up in the album. Certainly within the title track, Dead Again. It kind of, yeah, it's a strange album, but it has really grown on me with time. Certainly the first sort of 2 sides, really strong. Not a massive fan of progressive stuff, but this isn't progressive in a totally crazy prog kind of sense, but it's definitely more intricate. It's a really interesting album, actually. And I've been really enjoying it. Really enjoying revisiting this one. So Dead Again, for me, has clawed its way up to number 6. But I will admit, number 6 and 7, so Dead Again and 9, were rotating quite a lot, quite heavily for me. So, on to number 5. A fantastic album. It was the 4th album from 1994. This is Time. Great cover. I think this was either the 2nd or the 3rd Mercyful Fate album that I owned. Memory serves. I've been into Mercyful Fate for quite a long time. And I love this album. I think it's brilliant. It has some incredibly memorable, very, very catchy tracks. Nightmare Be Thy Name. Sinister. Really unnerving. The King sounds brilliant here. The whole band is just so good. Angel of Light is really, really memorable, really catchy. It's got great kind of soaring vocals. And of course, this is an interesting lineup, crucial lineup. We still have Denner and Sherman on guitars, the King sounding brilliant. Then we've got Snowy Shore on drums, does a good job, no doubt about that. And then we've got Charlie D'Angelo, great bassist, good player, strong lineup, and I think this is a good album. This is a really good album. I think this album and the one that came after that have been pretty much rotating as well for me. This is a strong one. I think this is almost a little bit more melodic than what comes before it or after it. I think that's fair to say. But we've got some great ones. Witch's Dance is infectious. That is a great one. That's a great heavy metal, great number. Love that one. My Demon is great. Time is a bit of a gentle kind of melodic epic there. The Preacher's a great heavy one. Lady in Black, Mirror, Afterlife. But then we've got the epic Castillo del Mortes, closing track there. Very memorable, very, very good stuff. A solid Mercyful Fate album. Great playing, great tracks. What's more to say? Time, for me, is clocking in at number 5. So on to number 4 then. This one has really grown in my estimations as well over time. We're going with Into the Unknown. So this album was released a year after our Time album. I believe it was 1995. No, 1996. I do beg your pardon. So a slight delay. But this is a great album. And I think it's interesting because I did a little bit of reading around this album prior to doing this ranking. And actually, I think by that point, this was the most commercially successful album to date. Which is interesting because I wouldn't necessarily have thought that. Although it makes sense, I suppose. They were building their fan base back up after kind of a bit of a period of inactivity, a split. But what I would say is this is packed full of seriously catchy songs. But it does actually really remind me of King Diamond's solo stuff. Abigail Through the Eye, or Conspiracy maybe. I don't know why, there's just something about it that there's a lot of tracks on here that you could imagine would sit quite comfortably on those previously mentioned albums. But we've got some brilliant tracks here. Again, the whole sound is great. So it's produced by King Diamond and Tim Kimsey, executive producer Brian Slagle, Metal Blade Records. But The Uninvited Guest, so catchy, such a great track. Absolutely love that one. The Ghost of Change is brilliant. Love that. Listen to the Bell. The very catchy and also brilliant. Certainly that bass. I love that. 15 Men and a Bottle of Rum. Great stuff. Into the Unknown, the title track is really good as well. A little bit more of a longer track, a bit of an epic. Dead Time is the only one that I find a little bit kind of unsettling. King Diamond's lullaby voice is so sinister, so creepy. I know it's meant to be, that's the whole point, but it really is. Holy Water is a great one, and then the closing track, Cthulhu, the Mad Arab Part 2. Brilliant. And actually that's an important track that I kind of overlooked mentioning, talking about Time, I should say. The Mad Arab, that is so catchy. That's such a memorable piece as well. But I think Time and Into the Unknown, pretty close in my opinion. They're both brilliant albums. They have quite a similar feel to it. But this album, interesting, I overlooked this for a long time, and I don't know why. I have no idea why. I think way back when I had a bit of a confusion, made a bit of a mistake between Into the Unknown and the beginning compilation, where they're kind of similar stark album covers, and I thought this was a demo or an early release. That said, it's certainly grown on me with time, and I think this is a brilliant album. Brilliant album. So for me, album number 4 is Into the Unknown. Great album. Love King Diamond. So on to number 3 then, another album that has really grown on me with time, and I can say with good reason. I'm going with 1993 I think it was. Anyway, the comeback album, In the Shadows. So this album was following I think it was 9-year gap, 9-year hiatus, where he didn't have any activity, the band had split. I believe that there was some musical differences after or around and after the release of the second album. Tale as old as time. Obviously King Diamond was off doing his thing, other members doing their things. But In the Shadows came back, and it's a really strong album. It's a strong band. Mercyful Fate, they have their signature sound, and I think that's owing to the epic vocals of the great King Diamond, and of course, front and centre. After saying I'm not going to show off all the inserts and stuff, I can't help myself. Alongside Snowy Shaw on drums, Hank Sherman guitars, Michael Denner guitars, and Timmy Hansen on bass as well. So, we've got continuity here, but this is a really, really great album. Kicks off with such a great track in Egypt. That's epic. That could easily, there's a bit of a difference in the sound, but that could easily have come from either of the first 2 albums, definitely. Then we've got The Bell Witch, the title track of an EP, which is a great one. That's a heavy metal number. Great riffs, love it, so catchy. Then we've got a bit of a progressive piece in The Old Oak. So that, to me, has a bit of a proggy heavy metal vibe to it. It's a longer track, about 8 minutes, but it's such a good number. Shadows, the closest we get here to a title track, stunning. That's one of the album highlights for me. Amazing vocals from the King. The guitar work is brilliant. A Gruesome Time is great. 13 Invitations is so soaring and catchy. I absolutely love that number. Room of Golden Air is a kind of interlude piece, a short instrumental piece, which is quite proggy in its nature. Then we've got the legendary Legend of the Headless Rider, which again is a great number. Absolutely brilliant. And then we close out the album proper with Is That You, Melissa, which is interesting. I would say that's an interesting number. Obviously, a reference to their first album, harking back to revisiting that track and that album. It's interesting. It's an interesting number. It almost seems a little bit out of place. I don't know why that is in my mind anyway, but the whole album is really good. I think it's not as strong as the first 2 albums, but I think that it's a really great album in its own right. I think that if this sort of material had come out a year or a few years after the second album, 1984, I believe it was, I think that this could have been held in higher regard, and also would have seen Mercyful Fate reach greater heights as well. Just a shame for those periods of inactivity. This is actually a reissue version, of course, so this does have an interesting version of Return of the Vampire. So it's an early era's track, but in this format, it's re-recorded, given a new breath of life, alongside fellow Dane. We've got Lars Ulrich on drums. Interesting piece, but a great album. In the Shadows at number 3 for me. This is a strong Mercyful Fate album. So now we get on to the top 2 albums for me. pretty sure that this would be the case with most Mercyful Fate fans, to be honest, because these are absolute benchmark heavy metal albums, absolute all-time classics. And this is, maybe they have rotated a little bit, but it's been fairly set in stone for me. Number 2, we're going with the debut album, Melissa. This is a legendary album, released in 1983. This is one of the most evil sounding but brilliant metal albums I've ever heard. And I recently spoke about this for the essential albums that you can enjoy around Halloween. And I think that's pretty fair to say. With tracks like Evil, the brilliant Curse of the Pharaohs, Into the Coven, the sound of the Demon Bell, I should say, and Black Funeral, Satan's Fallen, Melissa. It's 7 tracks of pure evil heavy metal brilliance. Just look at that album cover. Amazing, absolutely incredible. I mean, it's a bit kind of shiny and reflective, so I'm trying not to blind with too much glare there. But great lineup here. We had the King, obviously, Sherman and Denner. We had Timmy Grabber on bass and Kim Ruz on drums. I love this album. This album has so much atmosphere, so much magic and sinister kind of vibes to it. It's proper hairs standing on end, spine tingling heavy metal. And it's one of those albums, first time I heard it, I would have been a early to mid-teen, and I can remember thinking, this has got to be some of the most evil stuff ever laid to tape. You feel like you're doing something naughty listening to this album. And I love it. I would say, again, many metalheads or many Mercyful Fate fans would probably share a similar sentiment. Curse of the Pharaohs and, say, a track like Satan's Fall, that quite epic track, and Evil are some of my favourite Mercyful Fate songs. Definitely. It's absolutely brilliant. So, it's a classic. It's an all-time classic. And it's such an influential album as well. Mercyful Fate have been a huge inspiration to so many bands, certainly thematically, and the whole occult and Satanism and all that sort of stuff has been massively influential on the second wave of black metal, but also thrash and heavy metal. Mercyful Fate is cited as a huge inspiration and driving force behind that. So Melissa from 1983 is number 2. So I didn't want to give number 1 away too much, but I love this album so much. I do have it on a t-shirt. So I thought, didn't want to give the clue away straight from the start. But of course, my number 1 will be the same as many Mercyful Fate fans. We're going with the excellent Don't Break the Oath, the second album from 1984. The first Mercyful Fate album that I heard and owned, picked up a CD, copy, can't remember when. I was early teen, I believe. I just saw that album cover. And it wasn't particularly accessible either. Despite the fact there's a Roadrunner Records, I believe, at that time. CD might have been. But that cover just instantly caught my attention. And I'm sure that would have been the case for so many fans and metalheads. That cover is so eye-catching. And as soon as you hear the opening notes and that iconic vocal piece from King Diamond on the opening track, A Dangerous Meeting, wow, that's it. You're hooked. Hair standing on end, proper chilling stuff. Absolutely freaking love it. The riffs, I can remember thinking at the time when I first heard this album, it kind of sounds a lot like Judas Priest, Maiden, early Maiden, but so much darker. They've got this real dangerous kind of mysticism to it. Very occult. Again, you feel like you're doing something naughty listening to an album like this. Testament to how brilliant Mercyful Fate are and theatric they are. Of course, fronted by the King, we expect no less. But Dangerous Meeting, absolutely amazing. Nightmare is one of my favourite tracks from the album. It is insane and just unnerving. Desecration of Souls. We've got Night of the Unborn, which is so creepy. This is proper Halloween music. The Oath is brilliant, as is the rockin' and rollin', kind of almost rainbow sounding Gypsy. Then we've got Welcome Princess of Hell, of course, a bit of a classic. I know that it's featured in King Diamond's solo sets a lot over the years. Come to the Sabbath. What a classic. What an absolute masterpiece this album is. I love it. This will be one of the albums that I take to the grave. This is classic. Mercyful Fate at their finest. You know, you just think after Melissa, after Don't Break the Oath, even In the Shadows is a great album. The follow-up 9 years later, it's a great album. If that had come out, you know, a couple of years later in the mid to late 80s, just think where Mercyful Fate would potentially have been. They had it. They absolutely had it. They kind of had a bit of a new wave of British heavy metal sound. I don't think that's surprising at all, given that, you know, the debut was 1983, so that was kind of the tail end of the new album. So I definitely think there's going to be an influence on their sound from bands like Iron Maiden or maybe Judas Priest. I think that's fair. That's to be expected. But wow, I absolutely love this. This is some of the most brilliant, dark sounding heavy metal I've ever heard. So number one for me, the follow-up album, not album number two, had to be Don't Break the Oath, an absolute masterpiece. And as I say, I love it enough to have it on this t-shirt, which has been worn pretty much to threads now, but hey, with good reason. So there we have it. We have my humble ranking of the full-length studio albums of the mighty Mercyful Fate. And just to remind again, in case we've forgotten in those few minutes, at number 7 we have number 9 from 1999. Then at number 6 we have Dead Again, which was 1998. Very interesting, very heavy progressive album that's grown on me a lot over time. Then at number 5 we have Time, a stunning album. Then we've got at number 4 we've got Into the Unknown, the follow-up there, but that's a masterpiece. Then we've got the brilliant third album, In the Shadows, at number 3. Number 2, we've got Melissa, the debut. Absolute benchmark album. And of course, number 1, Don't Break the Oath. Love it. So my friends, what are your thoughts and opinions on Mercyful Fate? Very interested to hear your thoughts on the band, your thoughts on these albums. How would you rank the full-length studio albums of Mercyful Fate? Very interested to hear what your take is on my ranking, but also how you would position these brilliant, brilliant albums. As I say, at some point in the coming months, I'm going to be revisiting Mercyful Fate and showing off all of these vinyls, as they're all kind of reissue packages, but they've all got cool variants and posters and all sorts of stuff there. And also I've got all of the albums on CD, different versions, EPs, and some other interesting Mercyful Fate articles as well. So my friends, do let me know what you think of this particular ranking, and do check back soon for more reviews and recommendations of all the good heavy things. Thanks very much for watching. Please do feel free to like, subscribe, share. The support is very much appreciated as always. Do take care of yourselves. Until next time, keep supporting metal and stay heavy.